Hey everyone! This is a quick reminder to subscribe and hit that like button. It lets me know that you are enjoying my content. Also, feel free to drop your suggestions for future stories in the comments below. Thank you for listening, and let's dive right in. I've always loved the sea. Don't ask me why. It's not like I grew up near it or anything, just one of those things that got stuck in my bones. Something about the way the dark water hums like it knows secrets. Something about how it doesn't care who you are. My parents, bless them, hated that about me. I used to talk about becoming an engineer or mechanic, working on the ships, maybe one day building something that floats out there on the edge of nowhere. They didn't like that, pushed me toward medicine instead. It's not a job for a smart girl like you, my dad would say, which if you think about it, is his own little backhanded compliment. So I did what I was told. I studied hard, learned how to stitch flesh, read vitals, reset bones, graduated top third of my class, became the kind of girl you'd trust to patch you up after you did something stupid with a chainsaw. But it was never really for me. I did it for them. They're good people, really. Just boring. Rooted. Somewhere along the line, though, I slipped through the cracks. I don't even remember how. One day I was doing clinical rotations in a clean white hospital, and the next I was on a cargo vessel, trying to stop a guy from bleeding out after he thought it'd be fun to juggle chains with a cracked wrist. I became a ship's medic. Took me a few years, but I finally did something for me. The job wasn't glamorous. Hell, some of the injuries I saw out there would make your stomach try to file for divorce. There was the guy who got his hand caught in a hydraulic line, skin peeled back like a banana, bones sticking out like a question mark. Or the welder who didn't wait for the blowback to clear, burned half his face off and still asked if he could finish his shift. I've seen eyes pop out, lungs collapse, even a man who walked halfway across the deck with a pipe impaled through his thigh like he hadn't noticed. So yeah, when Ash called me, I didn't hesitate. "We need someone calm out here," he said. "Someone who won't ask too many questions." A weird sentence. But you get used to weird, working at sea. Sailors are a strange breed, superstitious, twitchy, prone to staring off into space like something's whispering in their ear. I figured, whatever it was, I could handle it. "You know me," I told Ash. "I can do it." Also, the pay was double, literally double. What kind of idiot would turn that down? Took a few weeks to sort the logistics, but soon enough, I was sitting shoulder to shoulder with 10 strangers in a tin can with blades. We'd taken off from Scotland, headed straight out into the North Sea. 2 pilots, 12 in total, orange survival suits, life jackets. The whole look screamed safety and fashion disaster. The suits trapped heat, like we were shrink-wrapped in our own breath, smelled like salt, grease, and nervous sweat, the kind people pretend doesn't belong to them. Nobody talked. Just the hump-hump-hump of the blades and the occasional sniff from the guy next to me. Across from me, there was an older man, grizzled, weathered hands, gray stubble crawling up his jaw. Eyes closed, lips moving. Praying maybe. Or just counting the seconds until we landed. His knuckles went white around the seat harness like he was expecting more than turbulence. Next to him, a kid who looked fresh out of training. Jacket still crisp, boots too clean. His leg bounced like it was powered by Red Bull and existential dread. Every time he peeked out the window and saw nothing but ocean, he flinched. To my left was a woman with a shaved head. Didn't blink, just stared forward like she was watching something crawl up out of the future. She looked at me once, just once, and her eyes didn't say hello. They said, "You're not ready." I looked down at my gloved hands. One message from Ash. One promise of good pay. A place that needed a medic and wouldn't ask too many questions. Now I was strapped into a flying metal tube, heading toward a steel grave floating in the middle of the sea. When the rig finally came into view through the fog, my stomach sank. It loomed out of the mist like a rotting castle, towering cranes, flickering lights, endless scaffolding. It didn't look like a workplace. It looked like the kind of place you disappear into. Even though it was still daylight, the sea looked pitch black, like ink, like it swallowed light for fun. That was the first time in my life the ocean made me feel small, afraid. The moment the chopper touched down, the wind slapped us hard, sharp and freezing, smelled like rust and rot and salt. We climbed out one by one, boots clanging on the steel deck. The rig groaned under our weight. Like it hated us. I clutched my duffel tighter and followed the others, heads down, marching toward the man waiting by the door. He didn't move. Not an inch. Mid-40s, high and tight haircut, oil-stained parka, clipboard clutched like a weapon, eyes like drill bits. He looked like the kind of man who ate frostbite for breakfast and asked for seconds. Inside. Let's go, he barked. Briefing room. Move it. We obeyed. Inside felt warmer but not better. Dim lights. Metal walls sweating with condensation. Diesel. Damp socks. A place that reeked of use and secrets. The briefing room had cheap plastic chairs and a projector that looked like it voted in the 80s. The clipboard guy stood at the front. Name's Riggs, he said. I'm the tool pusher. What I say goes. You're here to work, not socialize, not whine, and definitely not ask stupid questions. He pointed down his list. Jensen, roughneck, returning. The prayer guy gave a nod. Ravi, greenhorn, you'll learn fast or you won't last. The kid's leg bounced even harder. Maxwell, Derek Hand. You're up top. Stay alert. The woman with the stone face didn't blink. Then he looked at me. And Claire? Medic. You've seen worse places, I bet. I gave a shrug. I've seen weirder. He gave the ghost of a grin. You'll fit right in then. I didn't like the way he said it. We scattered, took a few twists in metal hallways to find my room. Small but not awful. Bunk, locker, tiny desk bolted to the floor. I'd barely dropped my duffel when there was a knock. Just one. Firm, intentional. I opened the door. Riggs stood there. Same jacket, same clipboard, same eyes that looked like they didn't blink unless off-duty or dead. He didn't wait for permission. Just stepped inside and dropped a folder on the desk. These are the rules, he said. Every rig has them. Ours are just a little more specific. I flipped it open. Looked normal. Bullet points, headings, all that. But the rules? Do not whistle. Not on deck, not below, not even quietly. If you hear tapping on your window during night shift, do not respond. Do not look. Do not acknowledge the cameras. There are many. You are not the only one watching. If someone starts speaking in a voice that doesn't match their body, leave immediately. Daily check-ins must be made in person. No radios, no notes, no texts. I looked up. Is this for real? Riggs didn't laugh, didn't blink. You're not on a ship anymore, Claire. The ocean doesn't work the same out here. He tapped the page twice. These keep people safe. Or what's left of them. He turned to leave, then paused in the doorway. Last thing, he said. If you forget the rules, something might remind you. I opened my mouth to ask what the hell that meant, but he was already gone. Boots echoing down the corridor. I stared at the list. 5 rules, and suddenly the hum of the rig around me didn't sound mechanical anymore. It sounded alive. The first few days were fine. I mean, fine for a place that creaks like it's breathing and smells like salt, oil, and fear. I kept the rules folded in my locker. Read them every night before bed, like scripture or a dare. No one ever talked about them. Not directly, but everyone followed them. Even the lifers, guys with calloused hands and eyes that looked like they'd seen things they'd never describe. They went quiet at 22 sharp. Not sleepy quiet. Reverent quiet. Like a church bell had rung somewhere in the bones of the rig. But otherwise, normal enough. I patched up a driller with a wrench gash across the forearm, wrapped a twisted ankle from the upper deck, dealt with minor burns, headaches, bruises. The usual side effects of men working machines in metal towers above the sea. Too much coffee, not enough sunlight, stale jokes about cafeteria slop. And then Ravi didn't show up for roll call, no announcement, no alarm, just an empty checkbox beside his name on the clipboard. Riggs didn't say a word. Someone muttered under their breath. Maybe he got choppered out. But I'd seen Ravi's boots in the hallway that morning, perfectly lined up outside his room. Still too clean. Still too new. Nobody asked. Nobody looked. The silence stretched thin, too thin, like something heavy was balancing on it. Later in the cafeteria, I found myself sitting across from Max. We were in the corner, backs to the wall. Trays of bland food between us. No one else nearby. The overhead lights hummed too loud, like they were trying to drown out the absence of conversation. I poked at something pale and mashed. So, Ravi, I said, keeping my voice low. No one's really talking. Max didn't look up from her coffee. No one's going to. I waited. She sighed and finally met my eyes. He went out onto the upper deck, she said. Alone. After lights out. My throat tightened. You don't break the rules. She added. Not that one. I swallowed hard. You think something took him? Her lip twitched, not quite a smile. People say there's something under us, she said. In the water. Smart, old, doesn't like being watched. I blinked. That's not exactly comforting. She shrugged. Some folks think it's always been here, she said. That the rig's just decoration. That we're not working above it, we're working for it. The silence that followed was heavier than steel. Max leaned back and grabbed a bread roll from her tray, tore it in half. But hey, she said, tossing one half to me, it's just talk, you know? People get bored out here. Gotta make up something to keep the mind sharp. She smiled like she hadn't just dropped a neutron bomb in my lap. I didn't eat it. That night, I couldn't sleep. The silence on the rig had started to feel loud. Not mechanical anymore. Not the friendly hum of machines doing their job. It felt like something was breathing just below my feet, watching, waiting. And whatever it was, Ravi had looked when he shouldn't have. I pulled the crumpled rule sheet from my locker again. 5 lines, 5 commands, one of them already broken. I traced the words with my finger. If you hear tapping on your window during night shift, I closed my locker and went to bed. And I started listening, just in case. I started watching the cameras more after Ravi vanished. Not obsessively, not yet, just a glance here, a glance there, between shifts, after med rounds when I pretended I wasn't checking. They were everywhere. In the corners of the mess hall, outside the sleeping quarters, above the tool storage, in the stairwells. Watching. Always watching. But they didn't blink. And somehow, not a single one had seen Ravi leave. Not a flicker. Not a shadow. Not even one of those glitchy silhouettes you blame on bad wiring. Nothing. It didn't make sense. I told myself it was just bad angles. Maybe he slipped out during a blind spot. Maybe someone had wiped the footage by accident or on purpose. But that kind of logic only holds when the world follows rules. And out here, it didn't. I found Riggs in the control room one evening, hunched over a logbook that looked older than half the crew. The pages were stained, brittle, edges curling like they'd been dipped in salt water and forgotten. I have a question, I said. He didn't look up. You always do. There are cameras on every level, I said, stepping closer. Every corner. Riggs flipped a page without responding. If Ravi wandered out, I continued, someone had to see it. There has to be footage. He finally looked at me. His eyes weren't sharp this time, just tired. It doesn't like noisy people, Claire, he said softly. I blinked. What? You ask questions. You poke around. You hum when you think no one's listening. I stared. You're not making sense. He turned back to the logbook, flipping another page with a sound like old paper tearing from skin. Ash said you'd be the one, he muttered. Said you'd keep your head, that you'd understand eventually. My stomach sank. Ash? From the Hyperion? He didn't answer, just scribbled something down with a hand that looked steady until you really looked. Go back to your room, he said. Stay quiet tonight. I wanted to scream, to push harder. Instead, I turned and walked out, heart pounding harder than my boots. That night, it started. A knock. Soft at first, tap, tap, tap. Like a polite guest. Barely there. I froze in bed. It didn't stop. It got faster, louder, angrier, tap, 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 tap. The air thickened. Every instinct I had screamed, don't move. Don't look. Just lie still and breathe. But of course I looked. The window was fogged on the inside, but something pressed against it, slick and pulsing. Tentacles. Fat. Glistening cords with suction pads and twitching ends. They writhed like they were waiting for me to move. One of them curled, then tapped again. Tap, tap, tap. I stumbled back from the bed, breath caught in my throat. The rules screamed inside my head. Do not respond, do not look. Too late, I ran. Barefoot, heart hammering. Every part of me screaming to get away. Out into the hallway, past the lockers, past the lights that had flicked off for the night. Everything was bathed in low red glow, emergency lighting that made the world feel like a submerged nightmare. And then I saw her. Max, standing down the corridor, staring at me. But her body was wrong. Tilted, rigid, like something was wearing her skin but hadn't figured out how to stand in it yet. Claire? She said, but her voice didn't belong in her mouth. It was deeper, slower, wet. It echoed like it was coming from a drain. I didn't move. She stepped forward, her smile stretched too far, too wide. I ran, down the corridor, around the bend, footsteps pounding behind me. Whatever was watching wasn't just watching anymore. It was trying to speak. I turned the corner too fast and slammed into Riggs. He caught me by the shoulders. His face was pale, eyes wide. He had a rifle in his hands, not just holding it, gripping it, like he'd already used it tonight. "Claire?" He shouted, "Back to your room now." "I can't," I gasped. "Max, she's not right." Then we heard it. Footsteps. Slow, sticky. Max came around the corner. Her joints jerked with each movement like a puppet with frayed strings. Her lips were torn at the corners, blood ran down her chin, her eyes were wrong, empty. "Claire," she sang, voice full of salt and water. "You looked." Riggs raised the gun. "Run." We bolted. I don't remember making the decision. 1 second, Riggs was yelling, the next my legs were already moving, boots clanging behind me, air burning in my chest. Down the hall, through the exit door, out onto the open platform, straight into hell. Screams tore through the wind. Crew members were everywhere. Fists flying, limbs thrashing, panic pouring out of them like blood. One man tackled another clean off the edge without hesitation. Another stood laughing as he slammed a wrench into someone's skull over and over, blood spraying with each hit. Something had snapped. Whatever was holding the order together, it was gone now. And under our boots, the rig was vibrating. Not from wind, not from weight, from something beneath us, something waking up. At first we didn't hear it, just the chaos around us, the fighting, the shouting, the metal shrieking under strain, and then everything stopped. Mid-scream, mid-motion, like someone hit pause, because the sea began to boil. Actually boil, bubbling, steaming, roiling, like something was pushing up from below. The surface rose, not like a wave, not like water, like a curtain being pulled. Smooth, black, endless. And then, tentacles, not a few, not even dozens, hundreds. They rose from the sea, slick and gleaming, arching toward the sky. Not soft, not searching. These things ended in needles, sharp, gleaming tips like skewers forged from nightmares. The lightning cracked above us, slicing the sky. Someone screamed first. I don't know who. Then the creature struck. It didn't thrash, it chose. Each tentacle snapped out, deliberate, surgical, impaling its target clean through. A man by the railing lifted off his feet, a strangled sound escaping him before the tentacle yanked him backward into the dark. Blood misted the air. Riggs turned, shouted something I couldn't hear over the wind, then one of the tentacles shot straight through his chest. His eyes met mine. Just for a moment. Then he was gone. I dove. No plan, no grace, just raw fear. I rolled under a staircase, knees scraping metal, lungs burning, the smell of blood and diesel thick in my throat. Above me, the sky cracked again, lightning washing everything in blue-white flashes. The screams were already fading. The creature didn't rage. It cleansed. And I had looked. I'd broken the rule. Now it was after me, and all of them too. Because we had all broken the rules by now. I didn't even realize someone else had crawled under the stairs until their elbow bumped mine. We both flinched. It was Jensen, the older guy from the chopper, the one who'd prayed with his eyes closed. His face was ash pale, covered in soot. Hands trembling like he was trying to hold something invisible from slipping through his fingers. We didn't speak. What was there to say? Through the gaps in the stairs, we watched the platform turn into a slaughterhouse. Tentacles slashed through the air, precise, intentional, unstoppable. One man cried out for help. Another tried to climb the railing. Gone. Each strike landed with the cold precision of something that wasn't angry, just efficient. The storm above howled, and the rig howled with it. The wind screeched through the beams, the sound like laughter, like the creature was using the weather to sing. I turned to Jensen. My voice barely worked. Why is it doing this? He didn't look at me, just whispered, because someone broke the rhythm. Then, boom. A deep, concussive blast shook the entire rig. The deck jerked sideways. Steel groaned and snapped. A fireball erupted from the far end near the pump room, orange flames leaping into the sky. Fire. On an oil rig. The heat punched the air out of my lungs. Another explosion followed, this one deeper. Structural. It sounded like the bones of the rig were breaking apart. I grabbed Jensen's arm. We can't stay here. He nodded. No hesitation, no prayer. Outside, the creature didn't care. It just kept killing. The fire didn't scare it. The explosions didn't distract it. It wasn't here to destroy the rig. It was here to restore the order it thought we broke. We ran. The deck pitched underfoot, steel bending with every blast. Flames licked at the sky, casting long, jagged shadows. Screams came in bursts now, short, desperate, then silent. Another explosion. This one threw me. I didn't even feel the impact. 1 second I was running, and the next, I was gone. I hit the sea like a dropped anchor. There was no up, no down, just cold. Not the kind that stings, the kind that punishes. It tore into my lungs, screamed down my spine, wrapped around my heart and pulled. I kicked, reached. The waves tossed me like I weighed nothing. When I finally surfaced just once, I saw the rig, burning, a crown of fire on a steel corpse. Flames curled up into the storm, painting the clouds in red and black. The wind didn't carry the heat, it carried the howl. The tentacles were still there, still moving, still coiled tight around the rig like it belonged to them, like it always had. The lightning flashed, and for a second, I saw it all. Fire, steel, the sea, writhing with limbs. I saw the end, and then I sank. There was no fight left in me, no strength to swim, no reason to try. I sank because I'd looked, because I'd broken the rule. And maybe I wasn't the only one, but the sea didn't care. The rules had been broken, and now it was cleaning house. Maybe I should have listened to my father. That's no job for a smart girl like you. Maybe he wasn't wrong. This wasn't a place for me. It wasn't a place for anyone. I sank, deeper and deeper, until there was nothing.